SM3 kids, chapter 3.4. I am splitting this chapter up into 3 pieces because factoring is so important. You really need to know how to do this. I think I mentioned to one of my classes the other day that I asked I asked a pre-calc teacher what it was that they wish kids could do better when they came into class, and she said factoring. So even if you're not going into pre-calc, you still need to know how to do this for future chapters that we're doing in this class. So the reason I have a tree here is because when we started factoring when we were young, okay, I kind of did this out of order. I'll tell you why I have a tree there in a second. But this is what we're going to cover in chapter 3.4. Okay, factoring out a GCF. Remember, this is the greatest common factor. Okay, factoring just x squared plus bx plus c. Factoring by grouping. Factoring when there's a number in front of the a in front of x squared. And special factors, which you will need to memorize. All right, the reason I have a tree there is because you know when we're kids and we learn how to factor. So we do a factor tree, right? So 24 is, we can say 6 times 4, and then 6 is 3 times 2, and 4 is 2 times 2. Okay, and then we get our factors. So I have factored this completely. And that is what we're doing with polynomials. We're factoring them completely. We're not creating a tree like this, okay? But we're breaking them down into factors. 3 times 2 times 2 times 2 is 24. And just like these pieces, when I multiply them together, I get the polynomial that I'm given. All right, so one of the things that we need to do before we even start factoring a polynomial is we look to see if we can factor anything out of it. So we're looking for the greatest common factor, the GCF. So let's see what I have here. What do I have that I can factor out of here? Well, when I look at my coefficients, there's nothing I can do with the actual numbers. But when I look at the x's, I take the one with the lowest exponent and I can pull that out. So I factor out an x and I'm left with x squared minus 4x minus 5. And then, quite frankly, I could keep going. This is x minus 5 times x plus 1. But my GCF is x. Okay, over here, 3 does go into 48, goes in 16 times, so I can pull the 3 out. And I have y to the 5th, y to the 3rd. I take the smallest one, so y to the 3rd, and I'm left with y squared minus 16. And the way that I know I did this right is I can distribute and look. So 3y to the 3rd times y squared is 3y to the 5th, which I got. 3y to the 3rd times negative 16 is 48y to the 3rd. And if I kept factoring this one, okay, this is the difference of 2 squares. Remember, this is what I want tattooed on my ribs. I know that's weird. Don't let your parents see that part. They'll think I'm really weird. So, okay, so I want you to try this one. So go ahead and pause your video. All right, so let's give this one a try. So when I look at my coefficients, I see that 5 is the greatest common factor. And I look at my my variables, and z squared is the smallest one with the exponent, so that's the one I'm going to pull out. So I've got z squared. So I'm left with z squared plus 6z plus 9. Okay, so 5z squared is my greatest common factor. If I want to factor it even further, I have 5z squared times z plus 3 squared, if you went on and did that. Okay, so we did a few of these in that pre-test that I gave you. These the ones where we set them up like this. And here's the thing, you guys, I know you've learned this. You learned it in SM1 and you learned it in SM2. So I'm going to just go through these pretty quick because you should be able to do these. If you can't, please come see me so that we can work through these. It's really important. Okay, so what I'm putting here, remember that this x squared is what I multiply in these two spots. So I have x and I have x. And then what goes here is what multiplies to give me 16 and adds to give me 10. Now I've watched some people do this, and I've watched them do this. They'll do 1 times 16, 2 times 8, there's no 3, 4 times 4. And then they look and they add those up to see which one gives me 10. And in this case, it's the 2 and the 8. So I can say plus 2 plus 8. And that is my answer. But I think that's a great idea. I've never done that, but I think it's a great idea. All right, so let's look at this one. Okay, so I give myself my parentheses because that's just what I do. I have an x squared, so I've got x and x, because x times x is x squared. Okay, 12. Now I have a negative here, but let's do this. Let's do 1 times 12. 2 times 6, we've got 3 times 4, that's it. Okay, and I want to know what multiplies to give me negative 8. All right, well, this is a positive, this is a negative, so this is going to be negative 2 times negative 6. Because a negative times a negative gives me a positive. And negative 2 plus negative 6 is negative 8. Now, let's say I'm not sure. I can always FOIL it, okay? X squared minus 6x minus 2x plus 12, and then I combine these. X squared minus 8x plus 12. I can always FOIL it to check my answer. All right, so I want you to try these. So go ahead and pause your video. Okay, so here I have 1 times 3. That's what I have. That's it. So 1 and 3 add up to give me 4, but this is negative and this is positive. So I've got W and W. I've got negative 1 and negative 3, right? Negative 1 times negative 3 is 3. Negative 1 plus negative 3 is negative 4. All right, over here I have 1 times 35. Usually they're not those, but you get one every once in a while. And I have 5 times 7. It looks like that's going to be the one. So I'll have x. Again, I have a negative here, a positive here, so I'm going to have 2 negatives, right? And it's minus 5 and minus 7. Negative 5 plus negative 7 is negative 12. Okay? All right, finally, you've done this before. You didn't do it as a freshman, you did it in SM2. And grouping is grouping is done when we have 4 terms because we can group them in 2 separate halves. And I have got to do this in the next video because I'm out of time.